Thank you. Hi, everybody. The first things that we're going to say were about me, but that was a really good description. So I would just like to thank all of you for coming here today. I know that there's a lot of sessions going on at once, even one that I really want to go to, but I can't leave you because that wouldn't be fair. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much to the conference for having me. This is my first time here, so it's pretty exciting. So we heard about how I'm a master's student, and as long as I survive my thesis through the next 2 weeks, I will be a PhD student come September. But the things that are the important thing that I wanted to talk to you today is about a few students that I had the pleasure of getting to know over the last year, and how we built a website together. I've also never used these fancy screens. I'm learning that that is not a touch screen, so there's going to be a few kinks along the way with the technology, but just ignore all that. So this presentation is largely made up of my observations as a research assistant for the project of an anthropologist in my department. I'll be discussing the techniques we use to combine digital and traditional pedagogies in a research opportunity programs, explore the ways to create productive learning atmosphere regardless of a student's personal comfort level with technology, and how we might help undergraduates develop both academic and professional skills. So I basically dug my own hole by calling this presentation Lessons Learned in a Fairly Digital Classroom, so I figured I should probably start off with some lessons. This is going to be a very casual presentation, as you may be able to tell, so I'm going to go into these in much more detail over the next 20 minutes or so, but the three things that I want to talk about today are the fact that just adding internet to a class is not going to magically make it a digital pedagogical dream. The fact that websites take a little work to make, and that the real world does still matter for the students and for what they're learning. Sorry, I said there would be some kinks there. So as I mentioned, this is a research opportunity course. It's something offered through the Arts and Science faculty at the University of Toronto. It's open to second-year students. It's basically, from their website, it says that it is to provide an opportunity for degree students to work on the research project of a professor in return for course credit. So basically what a student does is they enroll in it for an entire year long, or technically 8 months. So from September to March or April, they're enrolled in this course. They meet with the professor whenever they decide. It's not a usual, 2 times a week plus a tutorial or anything like that. It's a very small class. The class that I was a research assistant for was only 4 students throughout the first 8 months of the class, with an extra one just at the end. So they're very personal atmospheres. The students get involved in hands-on research, learn various methodologies and theoretical frameworks, and develop relationships with potential future mentors that might benefit them in the future. So the ROP course, and I'll be referring to this research opportunity program as an ROP course, but mostly I'll be calling it Story Nations, because that's the name of the website that we made, and that's how we've just been referring to it for the past year. I became involved with it. It's taught by Dr. Kaleigh Mclelland. She's an anthropologist who works at the Department of the Study of Religion at the University of Toronto. She often does ethnographic research in modern Christianity, with some Anglicans, with some Mennonites. She's kind of all over the place. She's got a million projects. She's a very wonderful lady. She's writing a book, and it's called The Spiritual Invention of a Nation, Media and Missionaries on Indian Land, although the name has already changed a few times, and I think right now the pending title might be The Invention of Radio Mind, but that's another totally awesome discussion. It basically is a biography of this Anglican missionary named Frederick Duvernay. He was mostly active in the early 1900s and the late 1800s in Canada. He was born in Canada to European parents, and he had a lot of interactions with a lot of people at a very formative time in Canada's identity as a nation. So he started off in Toronto, and then he traveled to the Rainy River on a mission, so to go missionize the people there. The Rainy River is about a 5-hour drive away from Thunder Bay in northern Ontario. It's right where Manitoba, Ontario, that wasn't Manitoba, that was Minnesota, very different. Manitoba and Ontario meet, like it's right there in the corner. You could literally throw a stone and it would probably hit the American side of the river, which divides Canada and the United States. So it's a pretty cool place. The book is basically telling the stories about these colonial encounters in Rainy River, also where he ended up eventually, which was in Prince Rupert, BC. But for reasons that I'll get into later, this website does not concern Prince Rupert anymore. That was a lot of work. So the Story Nations book, and by extension the website, are primarily meant to bring into focus the ways that storytelling shaped colonial processes in early or early-ish Canada at the time. The purpose of the course was to make a website that would serve as a companion to the book, but also could be a standalone story that it could be told in its own right. So 4 undergraduate students, as I mentioned, were enrolled in this course over the past year. So starting September 2014 and, not 2014, sorry, 2014, ending in spring, whatever, 2015. Of the 4, 2 of them chose to remain in a special third-year research opportunity course that will be starting in September. And we also have a 3rd student that joined late in the year who will be attending for the third-year research opportunity course. The majority of the experiences I'm going to be talking about today are about these last 3 undergraduates because I got to know them the most. I had more conversations with them. I understand their learning styles better, so I think that I can speak better to their experience in this particular project than with the other 2 who are no longer with us, only in the educational sense. They're perfectly fine, don't worry. So there are also 3 undergraduate research assistants graduate research assistants on the team. I am one of them. We each have our own specialties. So one of the women, the other 2 are already PhD students in our department. One does native walking movements for environmental purposes, so like as a form of protest. The other woman studies how the experience of the Alberta oil sands is shaping spirituality among youth in Alberta and primarily in Calgary. And then I have my own pilgrimage stuff. So my pilgrimage stuff isn't really directly related on a lot of levels, but I was hired on this project a year ago, June, because Dr. Klassen had heard of my digital skills. I think that I had been told in my offer letter that I have heard of your digital skills and I would like to hire you. And I thought, yes, please. So my professional experience is actually mostly digital. I came back to grad school after working for a few years as a web content coordinator. I have professional experience as a web editor, so I'm used to copywriting, I'm used to doing HTML, CSS, community management, customer service, web mapping. Like the organizations that I worked with, you're kind of a jack of all trades character. So I enjoy having my hands in all of the pies, but not necessarily always knowing how to bake them myself. So I was thrilled when Dr. Klassen approached me for this project because it meant that I could combine my digital passion and my ethnographic passion into one glorious project. And I'm still just so excited to be involved with it to this day. But as I mentioned, the students are the truly important people in this presentation. So I should probably help you get to know them a little bit better. The names of one or more of them have been changed for privacy reasons. I won't tell you who or which is generally unhelpful for you to know. Oh, sorry. So the first student that I'm going to be talking about is Alice. She's a second-year cinema studies student. She's very comfortable with the internet. She has a lot of experience in multimedia production. So as a film student, she actually wants to be hands-on with film. She's not just a film critic, but she wants to become a documentary maker. So she's very active in those roles. Mark is a second-year conservation biology student. He is, as I put up here, not a friend of technology. He's the first one to admit that it's probably scary to him, but bless his heart, he tries. So he was really great because we didn't really have any biology interactions on the team, so adding him in was really, really useful. Tamim was the person that joined us third, so he's the one that joined at the end of the year. He's a second-year double major in computer science and human geography. He's extremely comfortable with technology, as you may be able to tell by the fact that he's a computer science student. So he already knew how to code. He's been using Linux for like 6 years. I have a quote from him that, in his own words, "Some guys fix up old cars, I fix up old computers." So the first lesson that we learned to ensure success of a class when you add digital components to it is that you're going to need to provide quite a bit of support to students and faculty alike. And I think this is something that we've already heard if you were in the same room not an hour and a half ago. It seems to be a pretty common issue for digital classrooms. So one of the things that I found really helpful was the very, very, very small class size. Like I said, for most of the year we had 4 students. Now we have 3. We might have more in September, but it's a very good size to work with. I was in charge of all things digital, so I was consulting on the tools we might want to use. I was researching alternatives. I was working on the team implementation, and I provided training on whatever tool we had to the entire team. So we're talking people who are computer scientists and people who know that their phone is a box made for texting but don't want to try to do anything else with it. So I had to work with all these different levels, and it was a challenge at times, but I think it really helped develop a pedagogical style when you realize that you're not always talking to the same audience at the same time, which I'm sure a lot of you who are faculty in this room know, but I haven't even TA'd yet, so this was a whole new world for me. So I was able to work with everybody's individual learning styles as well as their skills. Since we worked with these individuals, we were also able to assign tasks independent to them depending on what they were comfortable with doing, where their specialties lay, and what they wanted to learn for the project. So with a student like Tamim, I could just hand him a CMS documentation and say, go forth and learn. And I would know that he would just be finding all these, these GitHub trees or whatever, and he would come back a week later with an amazing practice map that he had made. And it was always really impressive, and that was always really cool to see. Also, because I'm used to usually being, I was hired onto this for my digital skills, so I'm used to kind of being at the higher level of knowledge base. So it's fun to work with somebody at the same point, just because I'm usually in a training capacity. So, yeah. But with other students, things like GitHub and documentation might be kind of nightmarish. So we were able to work with what the students actually wanted to learn and what they were comfortable with learning. So, for example, Mark was able to work to his comfort level, and he was eager to learn aspects of the class. He was eager to learn how Google Drive worked for collaboration, for file sharing, all that fun kind of stuff. He did try to do some of the CMS stuff, but his true talents lay elsewhere, and they were really, really great. So when he was able to focus on what he had, when he was able to focus on what he wanted to excel in, he studied the area's ecology and was able to give us, in turn, lessons on how settlers to the area in Rainy River in the late 1800s had changed the ecology, had changed the kinds of fish that were living in the area, changed the growth of the land. It was really, really fascinating. And it's a different side of the story that we're trying to tell that we may not have actually approached before. Since Alice was pretty adept with digital tools already, she had taken on early tasks of researching mapping technologies and storyboarding the website. So instead of maybe a more, if you say, traditional way of making a site-map, going in PowerPoint or something and making your little org chart, at the time there was only one other graduate research student, or assistant. So we sat down with the 4 undergrads for 3 hours with huge pieces of Bristol board and markers and just drew the website and its connections. And it was actually a really fun experience. And because Erin has a lot of experience doing storyboards for movies, she was able to really participate and take ownership of that task. And she really excelled at stuff like that. So this is not to say that all these things are impossible in a larger class size, but with so few students enrolled in our own class, we felt that we could really help them develop their skills in ways that would be benefiting the project and the students simultaneously. Since we had such a range of technological skill on the team, I often looked for alternative ways of teaching new tools. So I had to give the class, and by class I mean the 4 students, the other 2 research assistants, and the professor, hands-on tutorials and specific tools. So I would usually do that where we all had our own laptops that we would bring, and we would all sit down and I would run them through, okay, now you go click on this link, and everybody would go click on that link. So everybody's working on their own computers that they're familiar with, they know how it works, they're doing it. But in a team environment where we're all in the same room, I found that was really helpful because it gave everybody the chance to ask questions as they came to mind, obviously, but it also meant that instead of just following a tutorial online, somebody could hear somebody else's question, think on it, and then have their follow-up that they may not have actually considered asking in the first place. This is actually something that Alice recommended we do more of in the future, and I agree that it would be highly beneficial to the students. But at the same time, it can be difficult to remember the steps that I have taught them well enough to replicate at home. Tutorials do exist online, but it's not everybody's first nature to go and just Google for those things. And sometimes Google can show you the things that you don't want to know. So Additionally, this ROP class was made with the idea to expose everybody to new tools. So I had to provide a lot of training. And a lot of the participants didn't have much experience with these new tools. I didn't even have a lot of experience, or I didn't even know these existed before we started. So basically what I had to do was I made a reference document in a shared Google Drive folder that we used with extremely detailed step-by-step instructions for how to do the certain most important tasks. So it included things like how to collaborate on a Google Drive document, how to add records into our Omeka database, uploading photos to whatever we were doing, stuff like that. There are still some kinks to work out here because you do need to remember that it's in our communal Google Drive folder, so you actually have to remember to go to Google Drive to get the thing to tell you how to use Google Drive. So there's a lot of processes that we're still working on, but luckily I've got like another 12 months of this class to figure them out, so we'll be fine. So I thought I would tell you guys a little bit about the tools. The website's not currently public because we're still working on the content and securing permissions from various sources. If we have time at the end, I could run you guys through a little thing, but I just thought I would include a couple of screenshots of how it looks right now and sort of walk you through the functionality. So this is Story Nations, Media and Missionaries on Indian Land. The website is built on the Omeka platform, which was recommended to us by the digital initiatives librarians that we worked with at the University of Toronto Library, and they are, by the way, the best people in the world. I love them very dearly. We're tracing Duvernay's trip to Rainy River in 1898 by researching in books, government archives, and with the communities that still live in the area. Although he was only there for 11 days, he had interactions with all manner of people, from members of the Rainy River Ojibwe to the British settlers who had recently received land from the government, land that was previously owned by the Ojibwe. So there's already politics there when the Ojibwe had, I think, about originally 13 reserves in that area, and then the government came and said, you're actually not using these the way that we think you should be using them, so we're taking all of you, putting you into 3 reserves, and then giving the rest of the land to the British settlers that have just come over, because we think that they can use it better. So it's an area with a lot of contentious history, but it's very, very fascinating. So he describes his interactions in great detail, and those interactions are exactly what we tried to pick apart and study more closely. So on the website, we did gather the information we thought was important to the story that we're trying to tell. Users can learn about Duvernay's life, the landscape of the Rainy River, and the politics behind maps and representation. We also provide for the public a copy of Duvernay's diary, which we do have permission from the archive to provide. It's mostly complete. We have a mostly complete transcript, but you can probably tell that his penmanship is creative. So there's some words that we still have no idea what they say. But the advantage of eventually making this public for everybody in the world on the internet is that hopefully somebody who has a little bit of experience with that can come by and say like, hey, this word that you can't figure out, I'm pretty sure it's this word. And then if we put it in and it makes sense, then we're working together with people that we would have never otherwise even been able to communicate with. You don't need to know that part. So we took 2 of Duvernay's more actively described days and plotted his interactions with people and places on a map, which users are able to navigate by clicking on elements to see what happened at a specific place or time. So the website, as I said, is built on Omeka. Omeka has this really, really cool plugin called Neatline, which is what we use for this, where you can make interactive maps. It's actually really cool. It looks pretty slick. It's been a really great tool. I'll talk a little bit more about the implications of actually displaying this on a map, because we did have some issues, but it's pretty handy. So the students had hands-on interactions with all parts of the site in the development. They were involved with the initial planning stages. They had input about what audiences we were writing for, what our goals would be. In the production stages, they went to the archives and they did online research to find out more about the characters in the journal and what their lives would have been like. In the content stages, they wrote much of the copy for the website in collaboration with Dr. Klassen. And now, as we pull together that something looks more like a website than one of my insane project management spreadsheets, of which there are many, they are participating in community outreach, where we are in contact with some of the members of the current Rainy River First Nations to discuss how we might work together on the project. And like I've been saying with everything else, I'll talk about that in a little bit. So I thought I would talk about some of the tools and services that we thought we would use. We had 3 main priorities in what we decided to use. So easy to use is pretty obvious, good for all proficiency levels, because as you know, we had everything from all ranges. Open source was definitely preferable because our own principles align fairly well with the open source movements. This website is going to provide a story for people without access to the, well, this website is a story, and this website tells a story and is companion to a book, but not everybody might have the access to the book. They might not have the money to buy the book. They might not live in the place where the book is sold. And it's an academic book, and I'm not saying that Dr. Klassen isn't a great writer, but often academic books are just not as accessible to the general public because we like to use words like ontological on a regular basis. And those can be pretty scary words. So anybody who wants to learn about Duvernay and early settler-native relations has a chance to do that through this story. So using open source tools is kind of like participating in that community to a certain extent. And we would also have preferred that things were supported by the University of Toronto, since we are, after all, a University of Toronto group. It's a class, the U of T. I mean, what else can you do? The university just has so many resources available to students and researchers alike that they may not have been immediately aware of. So it was important to seek out and use whatever we could make use of. So this is a very dumbed down version of one of my many project management spreadsheets. These are some of the tools that we ended up using. The website is supported directly by the library and it's hosted on their servers. We chose Omeka as the CMS due to its nature as an open source platform, as I mentioned, and it's often used by other digital humanities projects. It also came highly recommended by those lovely digital initiatives librarians that I mentioned. Its plugin Neatline has formed an integral part of the site because we're able to store archival information in Omeka as records and then pull them into the Neatline map so we can actually have all of our information referring back to each other in kind of a nice cyclical package, which was very handy. For collections, it was a bit of a bumpy road for us. Collections is basically the University of Toronto Library, or UTL, because that's way too many words and I only have so many minutes. It's basically the UTL online archives, or at least this is my understanding of it, so I'm very sorry if somebody in this room has a better understanding of it. So basically what you can do is you can upload something, you can attach all the metadata you would ever want to it. So say a page from Duvernay's diary, you can say the archive it came from, you can say when it was written, by who it was written, by whom, and all that kind of stuff. And it'll put it in an actual digital archive for you, which is really super handy. And then on top of that, they are the ones responsible for making sure that the files don't degrade over time, because the sad reality is even digital things can get corrupted. And if you have archival information, just like the Fisher Rare Book Library at the St. George campus here, like you don't want to start losing things that you're trying to preserve. You're trying to preserve them for a reason. So at the beginning, we uploaded pretty much everything we had to collections. We were uploading a lot. Like there were photos, there were marginalia from Duvernay from books in a library, there were letters. It was just a whole bunch of stuff. But after a while, we came to realize that we may not actually need to be retaining all of it. And we may not even be making the majority of it publicly accessible because we wouldn't have had permission from the archives. And what's more, I mean, those other archives are responsible for this information. It's not our responsibility to preserve every single piece of data, or is it, about Duvernay. So after a few months of uploading to collections, we took a few steps back and we haven't really gone to use it since. That's not to say it's a powerful tool, but it was not the right powerful tool at the time for us. Another spreadsheet. So for project management, the two main things that we needed were file storage and file collaboration. For the most part, Dropbox was our go-to for file sharing because it's so widely used that even the members of the team who were not very technologically adept were already perfectly comfortable with Dropbox. They already had their accounts. They knew exactly what to do, so you could just jump in and go. The downside is that when you have a shared group folder, that the amount of space that that folder takes up space in everybody's, and Dr. Klassen has one of those nice, shiny, upgraded accounts. So she's got like a terabyte of space, and we have 2 gigs, and then the moment that she uploads more than 2 gigs, which was happened very quickly, all of our Dropboxes got completely full and unusable. So that's still something we're working on. For the entire team, for 1 year of business Dropbox, it would be $1,500. And while she has funding, I don't really want to push it, because that's quite a bit of money. It was either $1,500 or $15,000, but still. There's enough zeros that I was kind of scared. So what we ended up doing was putting important files in Dropbox. We used Google Drive for some files, but Google Drive, just the nature of it, is not really as intuitive. So for the many team members that didn't really latch on to technology as readily, having to go to Google Drive and doing just a few extra steps that are required to download or to share a file, it became too clunky that it wasn't sustainable. So basically what we do now is we store the really important stuff on Dropbox. Dr. Klassen has the big stuff on her computer and an external hard drive. And we're trying to figure out if maybe like U of T has something that we can store files on or something like that. So that's still a work in progress. We use Google Groups for group communication so that we could send out messages to each other and send files to each other. It's not a great service. I hope Google's not funding this project, because that wouldn't be a good thing to say, but it's not that easy to use. It's not that intuitive to use. We used it basically as a listserv, or like a forum and a mailing list in one. We stopped using it after a while. The reason that we're not using just a University of Toronto, like we're not using Blackboard or something like that, like those in-house class-specific frameworks for which we can do a lot of these things, is that we're planning on including many people that are not involved with the University of Toronto. So either we have people who are not actually in the class, like I'll mention a geography professor later, or we're actually including people from Rainy River First Nations who are not in University of Toronto. We want to be able to actually include everybody from the get-go and not have to make new services as our team grows. So one of the really, really handy things about Google Drive that you may or may not know, because I only recently found this out, is that you can collaborate on documents. So it's like real-time tracking changes in Microsoft Word. So I can't actually read anybody's name tag. I and my friend Jim are both working on a paper together. We both put it in Google Docs, so in like their word processing in browser tool. And as we're editing it, we can see what the other person is striking out and what the other person is adding, and maybe that person adds a comment onto what they're doing. So when you have a small class, and there's students that are in basically an anthropology or religion class, but none of them have anthropology or religion backgrounds, it was really, really helpful for helping them understand the ways that they might be able to change their writing to better work for the web or to better work for the field that we're in. And I think I saw Anne earlier. Hello, I loved your presentation, but it was just like what you were talking about earlier for writing for the web. It was a great way to actually sit down in real time and collaborate on something and have the students learn about how to and how not to write for the web or to write for these specific fields, I guess. We also used versioning in Google Drive, so basically it's just version history. It'll say, Kaleigh changed this file a week ago, here's what it looked like then, you changed it 2 days ago, here's what it looks like now. So at the end of the semester, another really helpful hands-on tutorial that Dr. Klassen ran, because she is the professor, I did not run this one. But we put beside each other the first draft of everybody's, or of one of everybody's, basically their little captions for the website, and then what we ended up putting on the website. So it could be up to 8 months of writing just in this small space, so they were able to see exactly how things had changed. So we went through and said, oh, that's why these words are used instead of this, or that's why we included this or took this out. And they all agreed that it was a really, really helpful way to look at their writing through kind of a different critical eye. So one of the other lessons from Websites Take a Little Work is that we eventually realized that a website is making a website is a form of close reading. So I'm sure the fact that it takes a little bit of effort to make a site is no stranger to many of you. So basically, I knew that as well, but when I joined the team, we got ambitious with the website we wanted to make. The original storyboard that I mentioned included like spinning maps over a video as a splash screen for the website, like things that weren't really doable in the amount of time we had or advisable from the web content perspective. So we had to manage expectations whatever. So the website basically became a form of close reading that we were totally not expecting. As the students went looking for information on their chosen topics, it became clear that no subject, no matter how seemingly insignificant, would become a simple task to describe. So I'm just going to start speeding up a bit because I'm realizing that I'm getting closer to my time. So for example, we'll take this guy named Horst Becker. He's described in the diary as being a former construction worker with an injured leg and a devout Anglican, because he walked 5 miles to get to communion in church on a regular basis, and his knee injury made that a horrifically painful experience. But as we started, and he's just a dude, it's not like he was prime minister or something, so we shouldn't be able to find that much information. But as the students were trying to look into the archives and everything, they found out he was a teacher. They found out that in 1887, his class had 29 pupils in the Rainy River School District. That's really intense. We found out he's a husband. We know when his wife was born. We know when she died. We know her name. We know that his daughter, Eliza, died in 1998, I believe, in Toronto. We know that there is a Thacker Road that exists in the Rainy River area, which we recently got to see, and that was pretty cool. So basically, this is a large amount of information when you consider that there are probably 24 characters listed in Duvernay's diary. Not all of them have full names, but it did lead to the team paying really close attention to every aspect of a person's growing profile in order to try and glean some new information from the website, or rather for the website. So if Thacker was a teacher, where did he teach? Does the school still exist? If not, why did it shut down? Where did those pupils go after? Where are they now? Close reading the material we had encouraged the students to do their own research, which is key. And I am thrilled to say that they became extremely adept at trawling through the archives and tracking down reports. They even became excited about the prospect of doing so. And they would come to the biweekly meetings and excitedly share what they had recently dug up in this dusty archive in Toronto somewhere. And that was really gratifying to see. So the last lesson from Websites Take a Little Work is to scale things back. All of this information meant that we had to scale down the website. We had to scale it down a lot. No spinning maps, no swelling music over videos. And this is probably one of the most valuable lessons. Our original plan was to map out all 11 days on the Rainy River. We have most of 2 days right now, and we're completely content with that. We may not even change that. That's how much work and how much content you're just able to find when you start doing this close reading method in the research for the website. We had originally planned on launching the website in March 2015. That is still the deadline for March in 2016. It will be about a quarter of the website that it was originally meant to be, which is fine because it means that we can tell the story we want to in the way we want to without spreading ourselves too thin, basically. And I think it's really going to make for a much more concise and a much more deliberate way of telling the story. The process of creating a website as a project made the students think perhaps differently about the material they were consuming and distributing, and how about people on the outside of the project would be in turn consuming and maybe even distributing the material that had been produced. Making a website of this scale may be a challenge, but I am going to be the first one to argue that I think it's a challenge completely worth taking on. And you can fight me later. I took karate for a year, so I'm just going to warn you. On to the last one, which I promise will be a little bit shorter. I know that we're a digital pedagogy conference, but just bear with me for these last few minutes because I'm all for encouraging educators to incorporate digital projects into their teaching. I've been trying to do it in my school assignments since I was 10. I am all for this. But I would like to suggest that actually meeting and doing some teaching in person has a lot of value that we can't ignore in favor of open source services and easy as pie collaboration tools on the internet. So one of the opportunities that the students had was to participate in collaborative meetings with other departments at the university. Alice joined us for a bunch of the Digital Initiatives librarian meetings, which she believed to have been valuable as one of her goals in the course was to broaden her already substantial technological knowledge. She had no idea what university or what library services would have done. And now she knows all this stuff, and she said that it's been really, really helpful for her. She even remarked that our regular class meetings, which were once every 2 weeks usually, would have benefited from being held more often or or rather would have been benefited from being held more often, as well as having more of those hands-on tutorials that I mentioned earlier for things like Omeka or collections, or who knows what else we're going to be learning this coming year. We also had we were also able to collaborate with the geography department. There's this one wonderful GIS specialist there named Byron that not only came to our meetings a whole bunch and very patiently fielded our novice questions about GIS mapping and all those kinds of technologies, but he built the pilot version of our interactive map, which I can show you guys if you want. He did a lot of work. It was really, really great. On an exploratory survey that I sent out to the 3 students, one of them marked the chance to collaborate with other departments as extremely useful, which I believe may lead to them being more comfortable with seeking out other departments on their own for future projects, but that's something that we'll have to find out if it actually works. The students were given 3 opportunities to present in various forums to elements of the public. So I'm just really going to go through this. Basically, Mark took the initiative to talk to the elder and residents of First Nations House. He set up a meeting for all of us to go meet with this man. His name is Andrew Wesley. He's also an Anglican minister. So we exchanged stories. He told us about his life, about his journey, his experiences in the residential school system, how he became an Anglican minister. And in exchange, we told him the story of this website, of what we want to do. We spoke to him about the things that we want to tell, and we got his input on the project. And that was a really valuable experience, especially because Mark, as a second-year student, was the one that took the initiative and ran the meeting. He was really great. He was really proficient. It was fantastic to see. The research fair happened in March 2015. Basically, all the ROP students for the whole year get together and they show their project that they'd been working on in class. Basically, we were the only projected screen in a sea of scientific posters. There were some humanities projects, but very, very few, maybe under 5 out of like 100. So seeing the students get excited and explaining their project to people like the dean of the faculty was, again, just a really great experience to see. They really were engaged and they were really proud of what they had made so far. So that was a fantastic thing. And finally, sadly, I have very little time to talk about it, but it's my favorite part of the entire thing is that in June we went to the Rainy River itself. Dr. Klassen has, her main interlocutor there is a man who used to run the historical center for the Rainy River First Nations, and he invited us up. He said, hey, why don't you come up? You can time it with our big annual powwow, come for a few days, see the powwow, meet the people, and you can present. So we did that. We spent 5 days in Rainy River. 6 students, 1 professor, 1 super cool minivan. We still like each other at the end of the trip, as far as I know, so it went really well. And having the students actually have that hands-on experience, actually doing ethnographic fieldwork, seeing the actual lasting implications to what so far has just been a bunch of dead guys represented on a map, I think that really helped to bring to the forefront the effect of the project that we were doing onto them. I'm just going to go here. One of the things that was cool about the trip was that Tamim, who you may remember is in human geography, he explained to me that in geography, a place is a space to which somebody's attached a meaning. The trip helped him realize how important it is to see and try to understand all the different meanings that might be attached to one specific place, and to see all the different meanings that people can apply to the places, and what happens when the meanings work together, what happens when they butt heads, like what happens when all these things happen at one time. So it was really great for me to see him not only bringing in his previous experience in school, but bringing it into this project. Don't worry, 30 seconds left. I was looking for a big world-shattering conclusion for this presentation, but the honest thing is that there isn't one. I said at the beginning that these are just lessons learned from observations I've made in the past in conversation with my peers. They remain lessons, but I think that through learning these lessons, you guys might have, I think that an argument can really be made that making a website is a really valuable pedagogical tool. It makes you look at material differently. It makes you interact with each other differently. And it also provides professional skills for these students beyond just, oh, I went to class and I wrote a paper. I'm not saying papers are bad, I like them too, but they actually have these new skills that they can show in the professional job market. And actually, 2 of the students that I spoke to said that they really think that what they learned in this class will help them professionally in the future. So the implications for the classroom can be exciting. We have new ways to engage the students. We have ways to encourage them through collaboration and research, but we can also help them foster skills that they want to learn or that they didn't know they want to learn, but now they do, while all working with their own skills and their own, they do what they do and they do it really well, basically. I asked Tamim and Alice, do you think that the Story Nations course will help you in the professional world, as I mentioned earlier, on a 5-point scale from not at all to without a doubt, because it was a super cool survey. Both of them offered without a doubt instantly. So I should probably stop talking now, but I would once again like to thank the Digital Pedagogy Institute for letting me talk to you all for all this time, and I'd love to thank all of you for actually staying in this room for the past 40 minutes. I appreciate it. I'd love to hear any questions or comments, but that's all.
So first of all, thank you. We have 5 minutes left for questions, so go ahead, any questions?
Well, I'm interested to know if the students who apply, obviously that shapes the information that you include in the website. Like you mentioned having, someone from ecology, bring in perspective. Did that end up changing the book as well?
I'm not positive. I do know that the book used to be just Duvernay as a chapter, and now the book is Duvernay the whole way through. So I think that in making this website, Dr. Klassen realized how important just really honing in on this one element of the story and just the multitude of stories that you can tell by focusing on this one potentially seemingly insignificant part it's really impressive. So I couldn't tell you, but I could find out.
Hi, I have a bit more technical question. Very interesting project, by the way, really interesting. I'm curious about the management of the website and what happens as you move forward, knowing that this is a fairly long-term project, short-term, long-term, over the next year as technologies change. How much of your time allotment is dedicated to maybe maintenance or archival pieces of that site and plans to move forward, maybe once the project's finished, how you might archive that site?
So one of the reasons that we're hosting it on the actual, you may have seen that blue bar at the top on the library servers, is because they have the power and they have the knowledge. It's not necessarily knowledge that I, as the digital project manager, whatever I'm supposed to be, it's not necessarily knowledge that I possess, but we know where to go for those people. So over the next year, the maintenance will mostly be in adding in stuff that we learned while we were in Rainy River. We took a lot of videos, so I have to remember the fake name for a moment, Alice. Alice is currently working on splicing all those videos together so that we can have an extra element of storytelling, another way beyond the text, beyond the images, beyond the map, that we can interact with people. As for the actual time allotment, I'm not sure right now. I think that in September we're going to be having a lot of more intense discussions about the future of the project and what that holds. I am employed through the end of the next year, and this is one of my absolute main tasks with Dr. Klassen, is I'm here to manage the website. So at the very least, she's got somebody to do it for 12 months and hopefully more than that. So we'll see.
Will we take one more question with that?
Yeah, this is, I think, more of a conceptual question. I just wondered if, with a project like this, do you need to take into account Indigenous ways of knowing or knowledge production, and how does that fit with the digital or the website platform?
That's a really good question. It's actually not the first time we've heard it either. It seems to be a very important one to explore. Basically, what we're doing about this is, at the very beginning, the main purpose of the project is it is a story that Dr. Klassen is telling. So she's telling it in her way, and her way is a book, and her way is a website that she created with students. However, when we went to the Rainy River, we talked extensively with the Ojibwe community there. So these are the descendants of the people, or a lot of the descendants of the people that are detailed in the diary. So we showed them the website. We had a bunch of their elders, or a few of their elders in attendance to actually see the website, see how it worked, to be explained. So they know. We had a presentation, a couple of them actually, where we showed them the website and we told them what we're trying to do, the story we're trying to tell. we got their feedback. It was very, very positive. Even people that in the last couple of years before the website started were iffy, like they were totally on board. So what we're working on right now is we're going to be getting a sort of public version of the website available so that we can send it to the community and they can give us feedback on maybe the ways that we've approached different topics. Or one really interesting thing that we would have never known is that, for instance, there's a word, Rainy River in Ojibwe. There's at the Historical Center, which is run by the Ojibwe community, there's like a little sign that has the Ojibwe word for it. I can't remember what it was. So the night before our presentation, we went, oh no, and we changed that on the website. And then one of the people in the audience of the presentation said, that's not actually the name for the river. And we said, like, what? The words on the plaque were literally the Ojibwe translation for the words Rainy River, but that wasn't the name of the river for the Ojibwe. It was actually basically the place of the Long Rapids. So we would have never known that ourselves. We don't speak Ojibwe. So we're able to do these kinds of things. And it's interesting that even at the Historical Center, there's this colonial process in the placard made by the Historical Center that it's not actually the name of the river, it's the name that the white people gave the river, and then it's redone into Ojibwe. So we've worked with them. Dr. Klassen's been working with them for a couple of years, especially the one main interlocutor, but we look forward to working with them much more intensely over the next year or so.
So that's exactly out of time. So thank you everyone for being here. Thanks, Kaleigh.
Thank you.